Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. One thing we like to do midweek, every week, both here on CBS Sports Network and on the podcast, which you can get wherever you get your podcast, is to take a deeper dive into these games. We'll give you our best bets, our picks on Thursday's Lock Show. But now it's time to really look at the matchups, the storylines, the implications of what might happen and what we are watching. So, as Alabama, which had a game that was much closer than anyone expected, though it looks better on the scoreboard at the end, they beat USF, and they now show up for one of the bigger non-conference games of the entire schedule. They will be playing in Madison against Wisconsin. And so, Tom, you have been for much of this offseason the Wisconsin whisperer. You seem to have your finger on the pulse of at least what they think somewhere closer to the program. So first, attacking this from the Wisconsin side, they find themselves as double-digit underdogs of more than 2 touchdowns in this game. Where are the places where you think Wisconsin has a chance to be able to make this a little bit closer? Or if you don't think that at all, feel free to entertain us and tell us why.
Hold on, let me get my finger on the pulse of Wisconsin football here real quick. Oh man, it's faint.
Cheesy?
It is not pumping very hard. Yeah, it is. It's scary. Wisconsin, the good news was last week against South Dakota, the offense did improve. The bad news is the offense is still bad. Like if you look at what they have done through the first 2 weeks of the season, there has been very little explosiveness from this Badgers offense. They are currently ranked 133rd out of 134 teams in explosive play rate on offense at 6%. Tyler Van Dyke, to this point, the transfer quarterback, has come in. It's not working out. Even if you include the bad years that Tyler Van Dyke had at Miami, he averaged 8.1 yards per attempt with the Hurricanes. He's at 6.4 so far against Western Michigan and South Dakota. So it's not as if the Badgers are facing the most difficult competition out there. But at the same time, I don't want to put all the blame on Tyler Van Dyke because I don't think it's all his fault. I look at what Wisconsin currently has at the receiver spot. I don't see a lot of guys getting open. So as far as my feelings for what the Badgers are going to be dealing with in this game, I don't think Alabama's a great team. I don't think it's the same team we've seen in the last few years under Nick Saban, and definitely not the dynasty years. But I have a very difficult time thinking that the way this Badgers team has played through 2 games, they are going to look anything other than 2-touchdown underdogs at home to Alabama. I think we've got the second straight week in which an SEC team is going to come up north and beat the brakes off of a Big Ten school.
When you were talking about Tyler Van Dyke, it sounds kind of similar, right? We've got a quarterback on his 3rd school where they're trying to, second for Tyler Van Dyke, but they're trying to recapture some of the magic that he showed very early in his career. I'm thinking of DJU who had that moment against Notre Dame and you saw flashes and you're always hoping you can recapture some of that magic. And even, aside from his year, which he tore it up, his first year starting at Miami, you still had the Texas A&M game last year. Like, oh, that's the version, 5 touchdown passes. Where's that guy? It just feels like you're kind of wishing, similar to what Florida State's doing with DJU. Like, man, can we get that version? Tyler Van Dyke may just be what he is, and that's a pretty average quarterback, and that's a scary thought if you're Wisconsin trying to go against this Bama team.
Danny, the other thing, if you go back to when Van Dyke was good at Miami, right? He was playing with a lot of tempo. That was with Rhett Lashley as the offensive coordinator. And Wisconsin under Phil Longo, their OC, has been a really fast team. In fact, last year I had them in top 20 in my tempo metrics. But this year, they're bottom half in the country. I think they're one of those teams where the helmet communications has caused them to slow down. And I think that's been to their detriment. I'm sure all coaches think, hey, more input is good. But I don't like what I've seen out of them so far with this reduced tempo. I think they need to go back to tempo if they have a shot of catching Alabama off guard, especially because Bama has 3 freshmen in their secondary, 2 redshirt and 1 true, and they have had some issues in the opening week. So I'm curious, like, does Wisconsin, do they fire up the tempo this week and really kind of show out something? Because this slow Wisconsin stuff, I don't like it with this offensive scheme at all.
Hey, Bud, what about Wisconsin's defense? Because Alabama against South Florida, there was some communication issues up front. Jalen Milroe kind of had to make things happen on the fly. We know that Ryan Williams is absolutely awesome, but I can't say that's a perfect unit either. How did the Badgers defense stack up against the Crimson Tide?
So, Chip, all offseason, I really hated this matchup for Wisconsin, mainly because I don't think their defensive line has big-time, like, future NFL pro players, which Bama certainly has a couple on the offensive line. And things got worse when one of their best defensive linemen was lost for the year in fall camp. But there's a but. Alabama has also lost some really important offensive linemen already. Caden Proctor was injured in warmups against Western Kentucky and was seated in a sling. We don't know if he's going to be able to play this week. Their right tackle, Elijah Pritchett, only played for the last couple snaps in that USF game because they were in danger of losing the game, and they had to put him back in because their backup right tackle, who's kind of the fourth best tackle on the team, I guess, because Proctor's also out, he was that guy was getting kind of smoked. So they have 2 injured tackles right now going into play in Camp Randall. So maybe Wisconsin's defensive weakness, which is clearly the defensive line, could be neutralized a little bit by Alabama's injuries.
And Danny, what about Jalen Milroe? Where would you grade how he has performed through 2 games based on your expectations of him going into the year?
Again, similar to the conversation we've had with a lot of quarterbacks that are in new systems, because he is learning Kalen DeBoer's new system. I don't think it's clicking yet for him. And I think you're seeing him rely on some of his athleticism. And there was a stretch in the second half of the South Florida game when there were either 5 or 6 straight 3-and-outs. And you saw Jalen Milroe kind of dropping a little bit of pressure, didn't know where to go with the ball, either took a sack, threw it away, or tried to run, and they were able to contain him. That's where I would think that Wisconsin has a chance, right? And you're talking about a 15.5-point underdog at home. How do they stay in this game? I think you cannot let Jalen Milroe beat you with his legs, because he is an incredible athlete. We've seen him being able to do that. Some of their best plays this year have come when they've utilized him in the run game. And I do think Wisconsin's secondary may be a little bit underrated. I think they're decent enough against Jalen Milroe specifically, where I don't think he's just going to slice and dice you, maybe the way that quarterbacks in the past at Bama have, or Michael Penix did at Washington in a Kalen DeBoer offense. So even with the talent they have, and Ryan Williams out there who's been spectacular so far, just don't let Jalen Milroe kill you, because I don't think he's comfortable enough in this system yet where you can just, you're really terrified of getting beat through the air, but where you cannot let him get loose. Like if he goes off, and you could see those type of games unfolding, that's what you cannot allow to happen. But I'm very curious to see what Luke Fickell has in store for him defensively, because he's always had well-coached defenses. I think they'll be disciplined. I think they'll stay in their lanes, and they won't, give up contain and some of the things that they're supposed to do on the defense side of the ball. And that's how you would make a prescription for how Wisconsin would stay in this game.
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup to me, what this Alabama offense is going to look like going against this Wisconsin defense. Because, Bud, you mentioned Alabama is messed up on the offensive line. They're dealing with injuries. And overall, it's kind of shown in their performance. They've been very boomer bust on offense. Like, you look at the one side, they have the 44% success rate on offense, which is not great. It's about average, but typically for Alabama, you expect to see a team with that kind of talent doing much better. But as far as explosive play rate goes, they are 15th in the nation. So they're either getting nothing or they're getting huge chunk plays, which kind of plays into Jalen Milroe's entire vibe, considering he's much of a running quarterback who sometimes hits the deep shots in the passing game when they're there for him. But what concerns me is on the Wisconsin side, they're also going to be missing linebacker Jake Chaney for the first half of this game, who got hit with a targeting penalty in the second half against South Dakota. So he will be serving that suspension. He's a big part of that Wisconsin defense. So missing him for a half, Wisconsin could find itself in a hole early that I'm not sure their offense has the ability to dig out from. And then finally, like you mentioned, their secondary, Danny, I think Ricardo Hallman's a very good player. I think they have other good players in there. But this front seven that Wisconsin's dealing with is not quite up to par with the teams that we have seen in recent years as far as getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And it's showing, because that secondary is having some problems. They currently have a 12.62 explosive play rate allowed so far this season, again, against Western Michigan and South Dakota. That ranks 95th. So a boom bust offense going up against a defense that's given up a lot of big plays doesn't feel like a great formula for the Badgers to me.
Yeah, explosive play rate against Western Michigan and South Dakota. That's not good. All right, what about our thoughts? What about our picks? What about our leans? Really quickly, let's go. Danny, Bud, Tom. Danny, what do you think? How do you think this ends up playing out?
I think Alabama's too much. I just think they'll probably lean on them. They'll try to establish the run. You're talking about the big plays. I think they'll get a couple of them. And I just don't know if I trust the Wisconsin offense to match that kind of firepower on offense. I worry about Tyler Van Dyke on this stage. So I don't love the Badgers here at home. Oh, is this our first mute button for Bud on national television? Is that the first one?
All right. Man, all this Alabama love, and over the summer I would have agreed, but they've looked quite disjointed so far. I don't know if I really trust this Alabama team to go on the road and win by margin. I do think they'll win. I think that Jalen Milroe will be the leading rusher in the game because Kalen DeBoer's history is that he leans on his studs, and the best thing Bama has going for them is Jalen Milroe's legs. But that secondary has been leaky. Against Western Kentucky, they had guys open, and the WKU quarterbacks didn't see it. Against USF, Barian Brown saw it. He just couldn't hit it, right? I think Van Dyke may be able to hit some of these wide open guys if Bama doesn't fix that leaky secondary. It's hard to blow somebody out and win by 3 scores if you're giving up bombs. So I kind of think Wisconsin may be able to cover here. We'll see.
I think if Wisconsin gets anybody open, they should celebrate because I haven't seen it at any point so far this year. I think Bama wins big.
Yeah, I got Bama big time too. We will have our eyes on it, certainly as it is the first big test for Wisconsin here in this 2024 season.